like really tough. Otherwise, if you walk out in this hallway, restrooms are out and around the corner to left and right. If you would, please silence your phones. That way those don't go off and pop off on you. If you have to take a call, I hate to have to say this, but like, please leave the room, right? Walk out, go downstairs, go out the hallway. We're in a very echoey space, so sound carries out of that hallway really easily. So just go in the staircase downstairs, just so you're outside of the room. Otherwise, how many people found us, or where did you find us? A lot of you guys are repeat to come and join us, but did anybody find us? Where'd you find us from? Eventbrite? Awesome. Meetup? Facebook? I know you. Andrea knows us. So Andrea, just so you guys kind of know, Andrea is our CPA. She knows everything taxes, and she will talk to you forever about taxes, but has a lot of good insight. If you don't like the blunt truth, don't talk to her, right? Because she's going to tell it to you like it is. She's not soft about it, but she's a very, very good business person, and she's helped us get out of a lot of jams and taught us a lot of things to get us on track, right? Hey, Sean, you're fucking up over there. You need to fix that right now, right? You keep doing that, you're going to jail. That kind of talk, right? So that is what you need in your business as far as like different team members around you, okay? Everybody know JP? You got to talk to him earlier. He works with Alex. And then people that are working with us here, this is Ashley. She is my COO, and she helps us with, usually if you see me around an event somewhere, Ashley's usually there helping. But great person to keep us going. And if you see online, you're going to see Vanessa, right? That's Alex's COO and operator, which makes him look like he knows what he's doing, just like Ashley makes me look like I know what I'm doing. So very important to recognize all these people that help us put this together and keep it going, because we, as me and Alex, would not keep this going by ourselves at all. We started it, and then we have had a lot of help from these ladies and other people, like JP's joined in and other people. So if you're interested in helping us, talk to us and let us know. We welcome that all the time. Any help we can get would be awesome. I think that's pretty much it. I'm going to let Alex take it away. And I appreciate you guys being here.
Awesome. Sean, thanks, man. All right, so I know we kind of hit this again. We have new people. Do we have any new deals? Anybody working any deals here? Somebody.
Deals, brags. Has anybody done a deal in the past 30 days? Yeah? Awesome. Let me get a mic to you.
Yeah, man.
Get the mic to you. Well, everybody can hear you online, too.
I think many of you heard that I was rehabbing a historic property that I was living in. Well, it's complete, and it's Virginia Department of Historic Resources complete. So
nice.
That's a lot of tax credit coming my way.
Give that back to him. Awesome. Anybody else, guys? It can be. We talk about this because we want people in the room to recognize people doing the business, right? I want you to be comfortable to come in this room and say, yeah, I did a deal and I made this and I made that, because there's somebody that's trying to do what you're doing and they want to know that it's real, right? How many people get stuck on the ads and YouTube and are like, that's some bullshit, right? That happens all the time. Versus when you come to a local meeting like this is something Alex and I have focused on really hard. We want to put good people in the room, and we want to put people in the room that are really doing business locally, right? How many people have gone to those meetings where you come in for the weekend, you pay $200, maybe $300? These guys fly in, take your money, and they're gone. And the idea is like, oh, I got an info email, right? Versus Alex and I and JP and Ashley, we're all here. We're doing the business every single day. We're in the trenches. We're dealing with the shit, right? So I want you to feel comfortable to come in this room and say, yeah, I did a deal because of da-da-da-da-da. And it can be good and bad, right? So get comfortable with that. With that said, we did a deal, and we finished out a wholesale transaction with a student that came to us 6 months ago. He came in, he did what he was supposed to for a little bit, and then he faded out from the wholesale transaction, right? He was in there, and he was pumped up, and he's ready to go, and he fell off. And he just came back, maybe a month ago? And he got his first transaction closed. We actually were the buyer. He made $5,000 on that transaction, right? So I was super pumped. Adam, if you're watching, congratulations. That was awesome. Keep going.
Oh, yeah. Anybody else?
All good.
All right.
All good.
Very cool. Next month, we're going to be doing multifamily. So I don't know who the speaker is yet, but
we're working on Tim. We have a friend of mine named Tim that's in multifamily that we want you guys to talk to. You might have heard him talk at Trig, but we're going to hopefully get him to talk here. Right? Really good guy. He's in commercial space and knows what he's talking about. So,
and commercial is so different from residential. It's all real estate, but it's just good to hear people that are in the mix doing that. We were just talking back here about SBA loans, and it's a different world, different opportunity as times change, and they will change. It's good to know what other options are out there for sure. So I think commercial is a great realm to look at, and there's so many different forms of it, but we'll dive into some of that. Probably more the multi too. Yeah. And guys, there is a lot of people looking for housing, and that is going to continue. That's one of the few things we know right now is that there's people that need houses. So multifamily, I think, is going to continue to grow, and I think that's going to be a strong market. I think residential so far. What's crazy, we've been doing a bunch of listings and they are staying strong. We're all kind of wondering like what's next, what's going to happen. Nobody really knows. But what we're seeing right now is even though the interest rates are growing, there's still so many buyers out there that it hasn't really started pulling down yet. I'd say it's not going skyrocketing like it was for the past year, but nothing's really pulled down yet, at least from my side. So I don't know if anybody else seen anything different, but so far it's still a pretty hot seller's market out there on the residential side. So we will dive into things. If you guys have never been here before, Opportunity is about real estate investing, financing options, and implementing those in the Hampton Roads area. As Sean was saying, every market's different. We try to focus on this market. That's what we're in, and we want to make sure we're prepared for right here. The other thing is we want to bring in professionals, people that are doing it, people that are living it, and learn from them.
Yeah.
Sean and I started this because we enjoy real estate investing, and we want to learn. So
that's how this started. We're sitting down having beers, talking shop, and then people started joining you, right? That's literally how this started, guys.
So, we want to kind of keep that flow going. And the other thing is networking. We're blessed to be back in here live in person. And so as you go around the room, and maybe after we finish the presentation, make sure you meet people. Everybody's doing something different. Like historical stuff, I'm scared to death of that stuff. So I'd love to hear about how you did it and how you made it through and survived, And
still have your hair.
Yeah. I don't see any grays in there. I don't know if you're like dyeing it or something, but yeah, everybody's doing different things. So there's always something to learn.
Yeah.
I think one of the things, I got into real estate and I was like, I want to learn everything. And I was, and I still am. I try to be a student, but the reality is you can't learn everything, but you can surround yourself with people who know something, who've experienced something different than you. So network is a huge part of this business.
Huge.
So the other thing is we like to meet at breweries and enjoy some craft beer, local beer. And so let's do this. Let's raise our glasses for a quick toast. May your castle be secure and your cup overflowing.
Yeah.
Cheers. All right, so awesome night. We're going to jump into it. Matt Fisher here, awesome guy. Just had a second child.
Yeah.
Well, I guess 10 months ago, but I'm sure you're still kind of in the mix. So awesome on that, man. So Matt has I've known you for
4 years.
4 years now. Yeah, we met at a Civic League meeting. Talking about short-term rentals and hearing all the Civic League people complain about the most random stuff. Matt was in the back of the room and actually had something sensible to say. And I was like, who is this guy that says something that means something? So yeah, we met there and kind of hit it off and actually realized we had some other connections as well. But I've been able to actually learn a lot about short-term rentals through Matt, and I appreciate that. His company, Tesseract Rentals, one of the companies he owns, actually runs one of my properties. So as I'm introducing him, I'll say I'm invested in him as well because I trust what he has to say. And in all reality, there's not many people in the area, and I do believe this, that know more about short-term rentals than you and Brian and your guys, your core in Hampton Roads. So we're just super excited to have him here, and we appreciate anything you share. And anything you say is pretty much gospel here. So just
make it up. Yeah.
No pressure. No pressure.
And then one last thing. So we were just talking. They're doing a city council meeting right now. They're actually potentially making some changes. I don't know if we'll address that or not. But short-term rentals are an ever-changing kind of new horizon, right? So if you're going to be in the game, you really do have to start surrounding yourself with people that are into it. Because even if you think you know something, it could change tomorrow. So in all reality, like I just invited some really good clients of mine to tonight, and they were like, "Hey, I can't come because I got a city council meeting about short-term rentals." So you really just need to really stay on topic. Always be learning. Always be kind of checking in on this stuff. And I think there's I won't talk any further, but I think there's so much opportunity in it, but you really do have to be a student of the short-term rentals. And that's why we got Matt here. He's going to fill us in. So Matt, thank you, man.
Thanks so much for the intro.
Hey,
Appreciate
sorry, Matt. Before, let's go ahead and give one of those free beers away.
Did everybody sign in?
Yeah, did everyone sign in?
You have not
Came
signed
in?
in. You still have a chance.
Okay.
We'll do another one after Matt is done talking. But let's see. I might have put Vanessa on the spot a little bit too much.
Are you running your pinwheel?
Yeah, Vanessa's trying to. Oop. Hold on. Oh, I'm not ready. Over here. Okay,
There we go.
here's our pinwheel.
We gotta.
All right. Go ahead, Vanessa.
This better not be rigged.
Maybe.
It's rigged.
Who would it be rigged for?
Ah,
All
nice.
Rachel Thomas. Oh, nice.
Nice.
It's a brokerage. You just go right up to the bud. Well, somebody's there.
That's okay. You can get whenever you want it. Whenever you want it. Do you drink? Okay, cool.
All right.
I'm waiting for like a hell yeah.
And then, like I said, we'll do another one
Grab a drink.
as soon as Matt is done talking. So if you didn't sign in, be sure to sign in with the QR code at the front before then.
Nice. All right, Matt, floor's yours, man. Have it.
All right. Thanks so much, guys. So, hey, everybody, I'm Matt Fisher. Run a local real estate private equity firm called EF Capital. One of our businesses, so at its core, we buy multifamily apartment complexes and manage them, I'll say generically, manage them in novel ways, right? So we look at multifamily, office, other commercial real estate, and try to think about how do we add value to those properties, right? The first way we look is through operationally. Can we add value in novel ways of operating these properties? And then through applying technology in creative ways. And so if you think about it, the last 5 to 10 years, one of the best ways to do that is through the short-term rental model. So Tesseract Rentals, so we're a vertically integrated real estate company. We do everything from the acquisition, design, architecture, engineering, construction, management, maintenance, landscaping, extermination, all the way through to eventual disposition. And so we eat our own dog food is kind of the way that I describe it, is that we build these businesses to initially serve our own assets in a way that maximizes value. And when we have those operations pretty well dialed, we then look at, can we serve the community and other owners with those different companies that we've built. So what we're talking about tonight, short-term rentals. Tesseract Rentals is our short-term rental. Internally, we call it flexible duration rentals, and I'll kind of get into why I like to talk about them more generically that way. But to us, a flexible duration rental is anything from a one night to a 365 night stay. And so the first thing I'd leave you guys with is this. Airbnb is kind of the colloquial, like popularized term for short-term rentals. And it's at its basic, I think why we're all interested and excited about it is it's saying that it's at its core, that by taking a house, a vacation rental, an apartment, and instead of leasing it for a year, that you're able to capture more value, that people are willing to pay more by having optionality, right? I'm slicing that block year lease into smaller and smaller chunks. And so people are willing to pay, if you think about like using an Uber versus, well, that's not a good example anymore, but like an Uber versus a taxi cab, like paying for convenience, paying for flexibility, that's kind of like a general principle that people are willing to pay more. So we like to think about flexible duration rentals and say that as you're thinking about assets and that you're trying to buy, is thinking about how do you maximize the value at any given time of the year. And so that could be in the summer is a short-term rental, you know, a 1 to 7 night stay. In the off season, that could be that the highest value you're going to get, instead of renting it for 2 nights at a time, renting it for a month. And so I think one way what we'll be talking about a lot tonight is how do you set up your Airbnb as a flexible duration rental to maximize, what do you care about? Maximizing your revenue over the year, maximizing occupancy, and then doing it in a way that mitigates as much risk as possible. Right? So we'll talk a little bit about that. So jumping in, mentioned this a little bit. So vertically integrated, kind of have our tentacles out in different spots depending on how you might engage with us. But on the Tesseract side, we manage a little over 200 flexible duration rentals in Hampton Roads. We've been at this since 2017. So in some ways, I would look at it, we've been like pretty methodical about like building out that model. We're one of the bigger operators regionally. And again, like eat our own dog food. Like we've kind of like proven this out on our own assets, and then we will manage short-term flexible duration rentals for external clients. I'll go to the next slide. Just a quick plug, if you guys are out there in the market looking for a vacation, you know, an Airbnb rental home, apartment complex, duplex, quadplex, 10 units, whatever, and you're trying to, as Alex said, regulations change rather frequently. And even the way that they're written today is and is not where they're headed, right? And so I think one of the key things we spend a lot of time on is thinking about and trying to stay plugged in on where regulations are headed. So long way to say, if you're looking at properties, we've got a link up on the next slide. If you're looking at a property and you're trying to figure out like, hey, this pencils out, I really like it. Tesseract, what do you guys think from a regulation standpoint? Can I Airbnb this? Not always so simple. Can I Airbnb it? And what could I reasonably expect to generate from a revenue standpoint? We offer that as a free service. There's a link on the next slide. You guys can all follow like that. There's a form. If you fill out the form, you put in the address, the details you know about it. We'll send you, it's usually a couple business day turnaround. We'll send you a full financial pro forma based on our data of what we think that would generate, as well as any regulatory hiccups, right? That it could be a, hey, no way can you operate this as an Airbnb, in which case corporate could be great. Or here's how it could do as a traditional rental. Or it's a yes, but. A lot of times in Norfolk, it's a yes, you can operate it as an Airbnb, but you've got to do all these things.
And
We'll
guys,
talk a little bit
we'll
about that
post
tonight.
that up on the Facebook page as well.
Awesome. So again, yeah, we do full turnkey management. What we try to design around is that if you're buying an asset, that our goal is to be you can be totally hands off, receive a check every month, and we'll let her rip for you and kind of handle all of that. One of the things, yeah, I'd say that's it from the management side. Totally turnkey, we handle everything in-house. Go ahead and go to the next slide. All right, so starting with the reason, kind of the reason for being, let's put ourselves in the shoes of a short-term rental guest, right? I think, you know, over the last 10 years, right, we've seen the rise of Airbnb. And one of the things, can't quite see the top, is that I totally believe, and I think the market's showing this, that short-term rentals, very much a maturing market. So the expectations of your guests are changing. What they expect from the rental, the general operations, right? We kind of have a line of guests are expecting the comforts of home with the consistency, quality, and service of a hotel. That would be a simplified version. So it's in some ways the hardest of both. It used to be that that Airbnb was novel, so let me stay in an Airbnb. I think if you have a unique space like a yurt or a yurt or a RV or whatever. Folks are still booking that because it's not a hotel. But I think far and away, folks expect all the service that they're getting from a hotel, and they want to stay either where a hotel cannot be. Let's talk about, I'll kind of jump ahead a little bit, but as you're looking at opportunities and why would an Airbnb generate good revenue for you, you want to be someplace that a hotel cannot, or offer something that a hotel cannot. That could be pets. That could be that if you think about traveling with family, having a kitchen, that really folks are benchmarking back to hotels of like, okay, I've got kids, I could book apart. Still somewhat of a value play, I think, for most folks. But regardless of which, the expectations are exponentially increasing. I won't walk through all of these, but across everything you could expect, you almost have to think about as an Airbnb host of, let me meet my guest where they are. How do they expect to be able to check in, right? Like, they want it to be seamless. They don't want to have to go pick up a key from your uncle and do a dance to get the key, right? Like, we've all been in a spot, I don't know if you guys have been like in Manhattan trying to check into an Airbnb, and they're like, go talk to Jimmy and then do this and don't tell anybody that you're an Airbnb guest. Like, might work in Manhattan, doesn't work that great here. So this is kind of a very simplified kind of grouping of what we've seen over the last 4 years of what a guest would expect. Seamless check-in any time of day, check out, right? We've all been in Airbnbs where they're like, hey, do the dishes and take the trash out and strip the linens and do this and do that. And you can get away with that, I think, in some markets, but in general, you should think towards, it should just be simply walk out, right? Like, that's what you do at a hotel. Again, won't go through all of these, but this is more like for your guys' reference as you're thinking about setting up an Airbnb, what are the different things that you should provide, again, to meet the guest where they are? Why do we do that? Reviews matter, but why do reviews matter? It's because it's going to get you the best search ranking, and therefore the best revenue. They're going to book your property before somebody else's, and your investment is going to do better. We'll go to the next slide. And so if you think about that, to like do all those things well, it requires a comprehensive approach, right? That, again, I won't go through all of these, but you're thinking about the way that you're designing and renovating the property. You're thinking about how you handle, your maintenance, your cleaning, your linens. How do you generate demand? How do you get out there in front of folks? There's a lot of things that are kind of going on all the time. I'd say both on the ground, cleaning a unit, doing the landscaping, the maintenance, and then on the behind the scenes, right? Like your focus on how do you maximize your search ranking and are you pricing it right? There's a lot of different factors there. And I think the really cool thing is if you're a newer Airbnb operator, the technology that's out there right now is so much better than even several years ago, right? Almost across each one of these things, there's a service provider that if you want to do it yourself, you can stitch together a pretty world-class approach to managing your own Airbnb. Whereas before, you're sitting on the Airbnb calendar and you're like making a bunch of phone calls, you can pretty well streamline through off-the-shelf stuff that's out there, right? But I think as you're thinking through your own mental model of, do I self-manage? Do I have somebody else manage? Regardless of which, you're going to want to think through all these things and make the decision yourself to say, do I want to build what my guest is requiring of me? You can do it. You can absolutely do it. I would really much encourage you to think through, like, is the view worth the climb? Because it's very much hospitality industry. I'd say that's one of the major things that I recommend to folks is like, Airbnb is attractive because of the profit that it generates, but you almost have to think, do I want to be a hotel operator? Because at the end of the day, you kind of are, right? You're getting calls in the middle of the night, and that can be fine. I think some folks are like, I really like the experiential part of hosting guests. And so I think just be very honest with yourself and ask yourself, do I want to be doing more of that? Do I like interacting with random strangers? Some people love it, right? If you're like, I don't want to talk to anybody, this may not be the business for you to self-manage. We'll go ahead and go to the next slide. This one I'll spend a little bit of time on. So up top, we have, it is both a changing and maturing market from the guest perspective and on the regulation side. So what are the rules and regulations that a city and a state have around short-term rentals? It's changing all of the time. I think one of the things that I'd encourage you guys to think about is early days, at least for myself, I can only speak for me, I thought regulation's bad, right? Don't want to deal with regulations. I want to be in a city or like launch properties in a place where there's very few regulations. That sounds attractive. I'd encourage you guys to think about this. That sounds attractive, but that means that there's no barriers to entry. That means that anyone can operate an Airbnb. And so if I look at even neighboring cities, one has strict regulations, the other has very tight regulations. Or sorry, strict and none. Areas that have very few regulations, you'll see a ton of Airbnbs pop up. And what does that mean for you as an owner of real estate? It means that your competition's increased, supply is high, so you're gonna get far less revenue on average, right? So I look at regulations as something to figure out, right? Like they're figure-outable. You know the rules of the game. So I like when there's at least some rules there. So you can look at it and say, if I abide by the rules of the game, I don't have to worry about this being like outlawed overnight, right? So regulations provide consistency in my mind, right? You know what the city thinks about it. You don't have the risk of there's no regulations, and then all of a sudden the city gets upset and says, boom, they're banned. That's a pretty scary place to be. So, but they're ever changing. So one of the things, like I'll talk Norfolk and Virginia Beach, but a general thing to look at is if you're looking outside of this area to invest, I would look at, you can look at city planning's website to see, do they have, the first thing I'd always check, do they have regulations today? Like let's talk about Newport News. Go on their website, no regulations today. Is that good or bad? I would say that's more bad because you don't know what every city, in my opinion, will end up regulating, right? It's a matter of time. And going from no regulations to the first version, a ton of risk. You don't know, are they gonna, government, we know, it kind of swings the pendulum. It's human nature. They go from nothing to a lot, to a little bit less, to they kind of harmonize in the middle. Let's keep taking Newport News as an example. You're looking at a new region, check the city planning website. Do they have regs? If yes or no, I would still call planning and zoning and say, hey, I see you don't have any short-term rental regulations. Tell me, are you guys discussing regulations that are coming down the pike? Newport News would tell you, yes, actually, we have red lines right now that are about to be approved, which is the case. So it's like, great, can you send me a copy of those? And they might be like, yeah, check out the latest like planning website, or sorry, the meeting minutes. And you can see, you want to know where is the city heading, not just where they are today, but are they getting more strict? Are they getting less strict? So I was talking to a guy earlier today, looking at Asheville, North Carolina. They're banned today, they're kind of changing it. I'm like, go on their website, call city planning. Get a pulse on where they're going. So if I were to do that in Norfolk, let's look at a live case study. The regulations, as Alex mentioned, city council is voting on a change to regulations probably right now as we're talking. I'll try to hit on where those are going. But I think the key thing, again, this will be for reference. I'll kind of just go through because I think this is really, really key to this group. These are the categories that look at every city. Density is the only other one, which I'll talk about. Every city is going to look at like these as they're kind of like levers that they can pull when they're thinking about, every city wants to be able to get reins on controlling the number of short-term rentals in their city so that neighborhoods don't just turn into hotels. That's pretty much every city's concern, is that investors will come in, put Airbnbs everywhere. It'll destroy the character of the neighborhoods, all those things, right? It'll be party central. And so we'll kind of go through one by one. So parking, right? This changes a lot. So cities are concerned about parking. Like, you're going to launch this thing. Do you have sufficient parking? In Norfolk, it is right now 1 parking space per dwelling unit. Virginia Beach, it's 1 space per bedroom. Norfolk a year ago, it was 1.2 spaces per bedroom, right? So that's a case of it changed. So if I have a 3-bedroom apartment, a year ago, I had to have 3.6 rounded up to 4 parking spaces for that apartment. Now I just have to have 1. So if you think through it, is that good? Is it bad? It opened up the number of properties that could be Airbnb-able, but will they change it again? I don't know. So you kind of have to make your own determination there. They'll look at max occupancy, rental frequency. Norfolk does not have any rules around how many reservations you can have in 1 year. So you can do as little as 1 night stay. Virginia Beach says you have to have you cannot have more than 2 reservations every 7 days. Insurance, there'll be requirements there. You know, as a property owner, you're going to want to have hazard liability insurance anyways. I personally think Norfolk's is a little bit low. So like one way to look at regulations is this is kind of like the threshold you got to jump over. And then you got to think about things like, what if someone dies on my property, gets severely injured? I don't think 300,000 is enough. That's what the city requires. Then looking at the building. So Virginia Beach, we're talking a little bit about some of the strictness here. Virginia Beach just changed last year from you could have an Airbnb anywhere as long as you go through the conditional use permit. They said, nope, you can now only have them in overlay districts. So they drew a line where you're allowed to have Airbnbs. That's the only place you can have them. You still have to go through the conditional use permit process. Anything outside of an overlay district is immediately illegal if operated less than 30 nights, right? So that shows an example of Virginia Beach, I think was on like version 2 or 3 of their short-term rental regulations. And overnight, something like 1,000, 1,500 Airbnbs became technically illegal. There's some nuance there around grandfathering. So if you're hearing a pattern from me tonight, it's look at where the regs are now. Try to think about if you're a neighbor, if you're a city council person, like what are you trying to accomplish with your city? What are the different forces acting on at Virginia Beach? You have hotel lobby, you have a lot of, North End, vacation rentals. What are they going to try to accomplish? So try to like get in their shoes and think, how would I regulate Airbnbs if I was king or queen for a day? And that's one good mental model to use. Norfolk. Norfolk does not have, they have the different character districts, if you guys have seen those. Well, right now we're standing in the coastal character district. They have a downtown district. There's different rules around Airbnb depending on the character district that you're in. So in Norfolk, that's the first thing you're going to want to figure out. What character district is your target property in? Now within that, today, you cannot have on a single parcel, right? You're buying a parcel with an apartment building on it. If that apartment building has 10 apartments, you cannot Airbnb a single one of them. It's straight out ban on any Airbnb, any parcel with more than 10 units. It could be 10 apartments, it could be 10 cottages, it could be 10 single family homes, which you wouldn't really have, but that's a pretty strict rule, right? Virginia Beach does not have that. You could have, like if I look at Pinewell Station, theoretically if Pinewell Station were in Virginia Beach, they would allow you to Airbnb that through a conditional use permit, not in Norfolk. So that's kind of the first thing, is less than 9 unit building. The regulations that are being floated and voted on tonight would allow 10 to 24 unit buildings or 10 to 24 units on a parcel on a case-by-case basis. And what I mean by that is the conditional use, you'd have to submit a conditional use permit, which that's a evening in itself of how to talk through that, but a conditional use permit to go in front of zoning, in front of planning and say, I want to Airbnb this property, I meet the parking regs, I meet the different requirements of the CUP process. What else do you want me to do to get a CUP? And actually, one of the things to mention about the conditional use permit process or CUP process, in my opinion, it's not gospel, but my opinion, is it is a way for the city to get all their wants and desires out of your property that they can't write into law. Here's what I mean by that, is like at the end of the day, Planning Commission has to vote on every single CUP that goes in front of them, right? So you get through zoning administrator, you're meeting the letter of the law, you get to Planning Commission, and now it has to get voted in, a majority vote, to pass it. And so they could say things like, I don't like that you have a gravel parking lot, I want permeable pavers, right? That's a real example. Or like, hey, you need to meet these landscaping guidelines. I don't like that your parking is visible from the street. I want you to obscure the parking with some sort of structure, right? So the key thing to do, the shortest way to say a lot of things is if you're looking at a target property, first pass, does it meet the letter of the law of the regulations to allow it to be an Airbnb? If yes, call planning, zoning, and say, hey, I'm looking at this property. I think I meet the parking requirements. I think I meet the occupancy, yada, 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 all the way down. If I were to apply for a conditional use permit, tell me, like what sort of things would I be faced with in order to get that? And they'll tell you usually, right? And you'll find so many, I think Norfolk is very helpful with this. They're very helpful. Virginia Beach is very helpful. they'd rather tell you up front. They don't want to waste their own time. They'd rather tell you up front than go all the way through the process and chew up their time to just tell you no. So that's my first recommendation. And you'll find there's like hundreds of random things that you might find there that I'm not going to list them all, but you'll find really interesting things. One of the major ones is there's a lot of older buildings in Norfolk and in Virginia Beach. And permitted use of properties have changed over time. And I think one of the most common things that I see is you're buying a triplex, but it's zoned now as single family. It was built as a triplex in 1955, right? It met the letter of the law then. But when you go through the CUP process, it basically opens the whole thing up for reobservation by the city. And they'd say, you actually can't have a triplex there, single family. Right? It's been operating all along the way. It hasn't needed a conditional use permit. And so they're not going to look at it and operate it. But you're asking them to change the use from residential over to short-term rental. That's when they can, in order to change the use, you have to meet the current zoning regulation. That's really common, like properties be sold as a triplex only to come up that you cannot operate two of them. You can operate one.
And Matt, I'm going to jump in on this just because
Yep.
a lot of people buying real estate. Before you purchase, I think that's a great idea to see, make sure what you're planning on doing with the property is going to be allowed with the zoning. And then if you're trying to do short-term rental, make sure that all aligns. Because once you kind of go to the city and say, hey, I want to do this, everything's opened up. And,
That's right.
And they could completely, they're not worried about how much it costs to get it from a triplex to a single family. That's not their concern. So just make sure before you purchase, you talk to a guy like Matt, or we run something like that to see if it would even work as a short-term rental. And then before you maybe submit as a short-term rental and open it up to zoning as a CUP, the conditional use permit, make sure you see that your property would actually fit in zoning as it is now, because you want to go make it a short-term rental. They might make you make it a completely different property. So make sure your zoning's aligned. That's all.
Yeah. And I think the only thing to add there is the city is the final say, right? So you could ask, I think there's very equipped people who can answer that question. The ones hopefully who are going to give you the best answer are like, here's my assessment of whether you can or can't, but you should definitely talk to the city. Also, I know I'm not going to tell you 100%. I'm going to say I think so. Talk to Virginia Beach, talk to Norfolk, talk to Newport News, Portsmouth, whatever. Yeah, go for it. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, to clarify, that means 2 people. So if you have a 5-bedroom home, you can advertise it to 10 guests, 2 people per bedroom. Yep. Virginia Beach allows 3 people per bedroom. Actually ends up so if you look at it, right, like there's your family, or let's say you're trying to do a corporate retreat, like that does damper Norfolk versus Virginia Beach, because Virginia Beach has no limit on the size of homes. You can have a 10-bedroom home, 3 people per bedroom. You can advertise it to 30 people. Norfolk, the biggest you can have host is 10, right? And so a lot of family travel, like a lot of us have even like immediate families that are probably larger than 10 people. Can't do it. Taxes, I think this is where it's going to land. This is where it is today. You're going to pay state tax of 6%. Virginia Beach, it's 9% plus $2 a night. Norfolk, it's 9% plus 3%. So pretty expensive if you add it up, right? You're paying blended average, as I look at it, like 17.5% of gross revenue in tax. One note there is that applies to anything from a 1-night stay to an 89-night stay. That's been recently clarified. So I usually call like the 30 to 89 night stays like corporate or extended stay. You still have to pay the tax. It's taxes side, permitting side. This is Virginia Beach. Everything that you want to operate as an Airbnb, you have to apply for a conditional use permit. Those are good for 5 years from the time that you're approved. Norfolk today, if it's a one or a 2 unit, less than 4 bedrooms per unit, you can apply through the registry. It's the same requirements. You just don't have to go in front of city planning to get approval. Anything 3 units or up in Norfolk, triplexes and up, you have to go through the conditional use permit process. As it stands today, until it gets passed, that is good for 2 years. What is being voted on tonight is extending that conditional use permit to be good for up to 10 years. You just have to make this will work. In order to comply with the requirement, I'm having to spend $40,000 on this property to do it, and the payback period, because of that, it'll take 7 years, 8 years, 9 years. They say up to 10 because they will allow your permit for basically to get you paid back. Very TBD how that'll work. 2 years is very fast, right? Like by the time you apply, get operating, you're kind of in the spot of having to reapply. The one thing, that I would highlight because of that is just because you get through the process once does not mean you're going to get through it again. And that could be for 2 reasons. One is that the regulations could change, right? That you were compliant under the regulations in 2022, but in 2024, when you're up for reapplication, they've changed them. You have to meet the new regs. That's reason number one why you might not get it. Reason number 2 is if you have complaints from neighbors about your property, police calls, city issues, they could decide not to renew your application. So you're very much on your toes kind of all the time about, am I going to be able to renew my conditional use permit? Probably the most important thing on here for Norfolk is also first pass is you're looking at a property to buy, go on the city website, for Norfolk, it's Norfolk Air, and look at the very bottom and see, is it in an accident potential zone? If it is, you cannot get a short-term rental permit or CUP there. My joke is they'd rather let planes crash on residents than tourists, but that's one of the big ones. And if the accident potential, if you think about Ocean View, it's in all these little strips, right? I've even seen properties where a couple feet of the parcel is in an accident potential zone. If it at all goes through your property, you cannot Airbnb it. So really, really important to look at APZ. That's kind of the first, honestly, when we're looking at properties, we're like, is it APZ? If it is, we'll move on. Let me pause here. Actually, let me go to the next slide real quick, just talk about some of the updates. These are updated regulations in Norfolk that are being voted on tonight. Essentially, the largest change, I talked about the conditional use permit duration is up to 10 years. It's going from 2 years up to 10. I think that's pretty great. The max building size is going from 9 to 24 units. Pretty great. Again, you kind of have to make a case for it. I think one of the nuances there to add is it's not written into the regulations. But what the city, if you think about it, is very concerned about is they don't want a lot of these 24-unit buildings all next to each other. So they haven't yet figured out a ratio or a max density, right? To say that no more than if I draw 6 that's a hard thing to figure out. So instead, they're using a little more like a really qualitative thing. If city planning decline you. Another really thing, you're looking at a target property, you want to Airbnb it. Talk like, oh, actually in that block there's already X number. We're just not going to approve any more within the 1,000-foot radius of that. Big other changes, anything with a triplex or above, this is still being worked out of how this will actually, the process you have to go through, but commercial sprinkler system, fire suppression will be required for any triplexes and above in order to be eligible for short-term rental. So very few, if no buildings in Norfolk already have that. So you'd have to retroactively install a commercial sprinkler system. They're also requiring either on-site management or in-town management with less than 20-minute response time, 24/7, 365. So basically what that means is you'll have to lay out a plan of, if you're hosting yourself, that, yep, 24/7, 365, I can be at my property to handle guest issues, neighbor complaints, in less than 24 minutes or less than 20 minutes, and be able to lay out. Again, it's really loosey-goosey, but like a convincing plan that you're able to do that. You need to have a number posted on the outside of the building that is reachable by neighbors and tenants 24/7. And then certificate of occupancy for transient occupancy. That sounds like, what is that? What it basically means is your property is now opened for certificate of occupancy review. So that's things like ADA. That's things like just general like safety, the condition of the building. It basically requires engineering review of the building. What the city is essentially doing is they're saying, okay, instead of banning short-term rentals, we're going to make them meet the standards of essentially a motel or a hotel. That's kind of a way to think about it. Some nitty-gritty things, you now have to have remote control access of door locks. So that's basically a keypad that's Wi-Fi connected that you can control remotely. Nice thing is those are readily available. Security cameras, and then interior monitors, but decibel meters. These last three things really are around the city, I think, being pretty smart and saying, look, we're going to continue to have neighbors concerned. Like, we'd all are concerned about this, right? Of having a party house next to you. Instead of just saying no party houses, how do we actually require Airbnb hosts to have the right, really like operational controls to try to minimize the number of parties that could happen? So the city is saying, hey, if you're doing those things, you're putting a good faith effort into trying to minimize parties or able to shut them down if there's an issue. Let me pause here. That's a lot of regulatory stuff. I spend a lot of time talking about this because it could be the best returning asset that you've ever seen. Who cares if you can't operate, right? So let me pause and open it up for questions on regulations, how to think about them. Really any kind of question around regs. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think.
Sorry, just want to repeat the question for anyone that's online.
Yeah. So the question was, in getting in contact with the city, are they easy to get in contact with? How responsive are they? Virginia Beach has a short-term rental, essentially like a regulation department. And so I think they're staffed well to answer those questions. I found them to be super responsive. So they posted on their website of email, phone number. Recommend emailing and also calling. They'll get you a good. I found them to be really helpful. I think Virginia Beach is now the mindset of, let's make our lives easier by giving answers up front versus like jam all these CEPs through. Norfolk is good as well. They're not as well staffed, I think, to handle as Virginia Beach. And there's been some turnover, but I think looking the last 3 months, they're now like fully up to speed, pretty responsive within like a couple days. Yeah.
All right, so for a single operator, how passive would you say an Airbnb is, and would you say it's worth the hassle?
Good question. So how passive is it? I would say, I guess just being honest, so like we started from one and kind of scaled from there. Early days, I'll just kind of tell the short story, is myself, my business partner, doing all the management. Not passive at all. Not passive at all, because essentially, like, imagine, your guests are messaging you or calling you whenever they want something, right? And so I think especially with the standard kind of raising that I was talking about, a guest checks in, like they're gonna find, like, stuff breaks, right? Even your best door lock, they can't get in, or something, they can't find things. So very not passive. And so that's what I mean by the kind of at the beginning when I was saying, like, I think self-operating is fantastic. Like, we self-operate. You almost just have to make a decision of, do I want to do by the time do I want to be doing this, right? Like, do I want to be doing it at somewhat of scale? Because by the time you build up your own operation to do your one really well, right? Like you've got your auto messaging, you've got your phone number, things like that. By the time you set that up for one, you might as well do it for 5 or 10. So the hardest is like getting it all started and going. You can do it pretty automated. It just takes a good amount of time to do that. And then by the time you do that, you're like, might as well do a bunch.
And I would say like Vice, I think you said you started in 2017 till
Mhm.
now, and I know the standards have rapidly increased in what a guest expects. Do you believe it's worth it, or of course I know that's on the spot. But
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So I think it's still one of the highest returning. So if you look at this versus traditional multifamily, at a small level, is it worth it? Yeah. Yeah. This sounds like a generic answer to it, but I think it depends on, like, for me to say, is it worth it? It depends on like your own goals, right? That if you were to say, and that could be a bunch of different things, right? Of do you want to build? Here's some examples. Like, hey, I want to get into real estate and hit the ball out of the park, like show my own returns at like a 40%, 50% cash on cash. And I want to do it again and again and again so that I could go to, you know, Mrs. or Mr. Investor and say, look at my track record, right? Like I've knocked it out of the park. I want to go do something bigger. So like in that case, like it can be a great way to show good returns. It can also, it's going to generate really good return for your dollars, right? And then you just have to decide, even like I mentioned earlier, like personality wise, right? Like if you're like, yeah, I'm great with I'm okay with being interrupted right now, right? In my sleep, it's worth it because I'm generating 3 times the profit on this property than I would if I was operating as a yearly rental. And there's problems with yearly rentals too, right? Like I think there's no passive real estate. It's one way that I put it. This 100%. Is just no passive real estate. This one's just like very not passive.
And I guess last question, sorry.
Oh, you're
like what kind of properties are more lucrative to get the greatest returns? Would it be like beachfront property or something that's near military bases due to the nature of the area?
Great question.
You don't get it back now.
Yeah. So I'll speak for like Hampton Roads and then try to give you guys some nuggets as you're looking at other regions. And this is more like what I like to see from like where I think kind of like best bang for the buck. We talked a lot about regulations and how those can change, right? So I think the best investment opportunities, if you're looking here or elsewhere, is always do your financial projections as if you're going to renovate the thing, you know, like get it ready for an Airbnb, put the furniture in, and then I say like proverbially like that you have to burn the furniture because you can't operate it as an Airbnb anymore. Do your projections that way to say, if I have to spend all this time and money and effort to make it as an Airbnb, and then I have to operate it as a yearly rental, that I still am at least break even, right? And your own metrics will kind of change of like how much risk you want to take. That's my own metric. And so there's a lot of cities that I won't touch because it's vacation rental or bust, right? That there's no like traditional rental market there. I'm not saying that's a bad approach. Plenty of people manage thousands of units, and the Outer Banks is a good example. Vacation rental or bust, right? Like who's renting a 10-bedroom house year round there? Not many people pre-COVID. So I like places that have that the cost per house or cost per door in apartments, that it still works as a traditional rental, right? That's kind of number one. Number two is that an area that has multiple reasons for people to go there throughout the year. So like Norfolk, Virginia Beach is cool because you've got vacation in the summer, you've got military base, people are coming here year round, you've got great hospital network, you've got, you know, CHKD, you've got the, you know, EVMS, so folks coming for school, ODU, there's people traveling kind of year round here. And so that to me, hurricane blows through for 2 weeks, knocks out your summer, you know, your July profit, you can still make money in the off season. So I like ones that have a strong on season, but you can still make money in the off season. And then really what you're going to be looking at is like, again, what's my reason for being in a certain spot? So beach, great, right? People always want to go to the beach, but I could say like, oh, it's also great to be in Ghent because travel nurses. You could also say it's great to be, there's got to be a reason of why you, again, kind of get in your customer shoes and think about like, why would I want to stay in this spot? Hopefully there's more than one reason, right? So random example, like there's other cities that I like that have some of those different factors. So, like Jacksonville, Florida, not super sexy region, but you've got large Navy base, you've got sports teams, hospital network, vacation town, similar kind of factors at play in some place like that it's a little bit less risky, right? And then I personally I think vacation homes, large vacation homes can be good. I like the diversification. I'd rather spend, if I'm going to spend $1 million, is it rather going to be on one vacation home or 5 apartments? My one vacation home isn't occupied, I'm making no money, but one of my 5 apartments isn't vacant or isn't occupied, I'm still making money because 4 of them are leased. So kind of like splitting it up can be good in that way. So like apartments can be great, apart hotels. And then there's kind of like a long tail of like people built really successful businesses with yurts and cabins and Airbnb resorts. So I would start with like, why would my guest come here? And in this spot specifically, wherever it is. AirDNA, I'll do a plug for them. AirDNA or Mashvisor are 2 websites that are pretty great that you can plug in a zip code, a specific property, and you'll get a decent read of like, what is your revenue going to be? What is your year-round occupancy? So you can be like, I think there's good year-round occupancy, but AirDNA scrapes data from other Airbnb hosts, and they're like, oh, actually in December, the average occupancy is like 20%. So it at least gives you a good starting point, so you're not just flying kind of blind. But yeah, that's AirDNA and Mashvisor. You can pay per zip code, which is pretty nice. Yep, 5 minutes, cool. Yeah, other questions? Yeah.
Alex, hit with the mic. DJ, kick it.
So a lot of investors have a checklist when they buy a house of, not new flooring, whatever their checklist is. What would you say your checklist is for an Airbnb?
On the renovation side?
Just anything. If you're going to buy a house for an Airbnb, what is your checklist of location, the type of house you're buying, stuff like that?
What's your silver bullet?
What was that?
What's your silver bullet?
Silver bullet. There could be a lot of them. So I think, okay, so first one is, it sounds simple, but like the property is tight, right? Like it's, whether you buy it in a state that like everything just works or you get it to that spot, you want to like overkill it, right? So thinking a little bit more like hotel use, that if I'm my like 17, think like your 17-year-old self going in someplace and just trying to break everything. Like that's kind of number one. Like it all works, right? And it's pretty foolproof in that way. That's number one. Number two, it comes down to so much of this, the revenue potential is folks are cross-shopping hotels versus Airbnb, right? So there's still a value play of like, I like as many bedrooms as I can get because instead of booking 4 hotel rooms, I can book a 4-bedroom house. And so you're going to generate more revenue because the comparable is pretty daggone expensive, right? So if I'm going to go house, I want as many bedrooms as I can get. And then really, so things that drive additional revenue, I think we're now moving into the era of it's got to be unique and it's got to be like attractive in some way. And again, it doesn't mean unique to you. Like you're not your customer, right? You got to think about who's coming to Virginia Beach or Norfolk or Portsmouth, Newport News. What do they want? And so it's almost like a marketing exercise of like, what are my customer personas? Who's coming here? What do they care about? Let me offer that to them. Like, it doesn't matter what so in that way, always think about your customer. There's regions, so I see on Twitter all the time, they're like, add a jacuzzi to your Airbnb and it'll increase the revenue. I'm like, yes, that might be true, but I then have to test that against, okay, who's coming here? What's the reason for coming? Will a jacuzzi make it more attractive to them than if it didn't? It may or may not, right? So I think it's gonna be so specific, right? So I think kind of getting your eyes to your customer, but in general, tight, it's got, if we're talking about Norfolk or Virginia Beach, like good beach access, some uniqueness, some unique amenity, right, that makes it pop. A lot of times if you can think about what are there not a lot of, it's like, if you're doing wedding travel, right? You want a place that like your wedding party can stay at. Travel nurses are big here. What does a travel nurse want? What do families vacationing want? What does someone working remote want? And so if you can hit like something unique for a lot of different customer personas, you'll do pretty well. I know there's a guy down in Outer Banks who's building 15 to 20 bedroom houses, exorbitantly expensive, but he's targeting corporate retreats. And he's like, okay, the comparable is like taking down hotel blocks in an event center. And I think he's booking up at 25 to 30 grand a week. And so that kind of blows out the model of like, he might spend $6, $7, $8 million on this house. It's still a good investment because he's really thought about his customer persona. And it's like, no one can go to North Carolina and do a corporate retreat. It's drivable from Ohio and Pennsylvania and this place and that place. I'm going to have reliable, that's his thesis. I haven't seen his books, but I think that's kind of like, always start with the customer persona in mind. And that's changing over time. So customer persona, look at the market. And if you're like, my customer wants a 2-bedroom apartment, and you pull up your city and you're like, all it is 2-bedroom apartments, then it's a little bit harder to stand out. But if you niche down and say, it's whatever, wedding venue stays, there's not many here. Yep. With that,
all right, so let's wrap it up, guys. Just a heads up about what we're doing here. So let's have a quick Q&A, right? But realize that they shut down at 9, and about 9:15, Ashley's going to come through here like, let's go.
Should we see what questions they have online, Ashley?
Cool. 9:30 it is. Party time.
All right, all night.
Yes,
ahead of
Ashley
time
will
work.
come in for security. So,
Ahead of time hustle.
question 1, was this helpful for what Matt's sharing? Yes? Yes?
Yes.
Cool. So thank you, Matt, for sharing everything. Awesome. I actually picked up some really new stuff from you that I didn't get to hear last time, so that was really cool. Online, thank you. If you have questions, go ahead and put that in. For those guys that are online, remember, this is that part. It's the beginning and the end where you're not here for the networking. You got the information, but this is the networking part that's getting ready to start, and this is where it matters, guys. This is where you get to meet each other and ask questions. And when I say, everybody's heard that your net worth is your network, vice versa, same thing, right? It's 100%, if not 120% real. The amount of knowledge coming from Matt sharing with you guys right now could curve you in money, time. Money is time, right? Like a lot of that. So take the time, and this happens a lot where I go speaking events, right? Come up and maybe have like a talk collectively, right? And let Matt answer those questions. Are you comfortable doing that? Instead of just individuals, and I have it happen a lot, right? People stand off to the side. They're like, I'm just going to get in and ask a question in a minute. Gather around and talk, right? For those online, next time, please be at our event so that you can meet these people individually and get these connections and meet the other people in the room, and really get to connect with people, because this is really, you say invaluable, or as Alex said, it's gospel, right? And this is really good stuff. I mean, this is going to save you a lot of time, a lot of money. So I really appreciate you being here. It's really cool, man. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so you guys stick around. Let's hang out. Let's have some beers. We're going to shut down everything online. All the mics go off, and hang out for a little bit. Alex, what would take us out?
Take me out. No, I don't know. Thanks, guys. Thanks for joining us. I think you guys all said it, man. Awesome stuff. Great information.
Yeah.
Hopefully you guys are sketching this down in your notebooks. And hop on Facebook. If you guys have any questions, hopefully you have some questions tomorrow as you're pondering this stuff. We said this is changing all the time. Maybe we can try to figure out what changes happened. We'll try to do something this week or early next week to say what changes happened in Norfolk tonight as we met here. Because as you guys are creating your businesses, put all this stuff into play. These things that Matt shared with us are
huge,
incredibly valuable. If you're doing short-term rental, or even, what was your term?
Flexible duration rental.
Flexible duration
rental.
rentals.
I like that.
In any capacity, you need to be aware of
I like
this stuff. So awesome stuff, man. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
We
Actually,
are
Alex,
going
on that,
to-
a real quick pre-plug. So you mentioned the changes that are happening. I'll send a link to you guys. We keep a public-facing website on specific. It's just Norfolk right now because it's a little bit harder to get through than Virginia beaches. But we keep a website of, hey, I've got a short-term rental. It's a Notion guide, but you can kind of click through all the steps, and we use that internally. It's a doc that we created for ourselves to keep us all straight as we're looking at ones, and we just make that publicly available so that you can do your own kind of
That's awesome.
Create your own adventure.
That's a huge help. In the link you talked about submitting your property and figuring out if it could even work
really cool.
as a short-term rental in Norfolk. I guess it's more Norfolk, right?
We'll do it in, anywhere in Hampton Roads.
Oh wow.
Yeah,
that's really
so
cool.
yeah, that's an incredible asset.
Very helpful.
If you guys are looking at properties, you'd be silly not to utilize that. So we will post that up on our Facebook page, and we'll do that link as well.
Also, guys, we're good to share that slideshow with everybody.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
So we'll make that available. Ashley and Vanessa will make that happen for you. Matt's information will be available to contact him via email and phone number, so you guys will have all that. And then to take us out, we're going to do one more beer. We're going to spin the wheel.
Whoa.
Vanessa or Ashley,
roll,
click it.
Where's the drum roll?
Oh, who is this? How do you say that? Nice.
Mr. and Mrs. Lister.
Miss Lister, you got a drink if you want one. Awesome. Guys, thank you again for being here. I really appreciate it. For those online, thank you for following us and sticking with us. Remember, next time, be live, be here. And for those guys that are hanging out, please come up, ask questions, stick around for a little bit, right? We've got the room. That's what we're here for. This is what the networking time is. Meet, greet, and learn what's going on in the industry so you guys can really progress. Cool? Thanks a lot, guys. Hang out.
Peace.
I just need...
So don't run away with it.